Hi, Ed Rushman, Whitestone Journal. I'm going to answer a question that I got online from someone in the Confirmation 1 class. I'm not going to say who it was. Not that you care, but you know who you are. Hey, it was about aliens, and if God created everything, what about aliens or the possibility of aliens? So there's a couple of different things about this. First, I'm going to deal with just the logical part, and then we'll deal with the theological part. Logically, we don't know. I mean, I know that scientists say, oh yeah, there's got to be aliens, but you know, if you listen, some of them are a little more reasonable and say, we really don't know. So an interesting thing is, it's just always good to know that nothing's proven, we don't know, and it's not like believing in God where there's some requirement of faith in aliens or that it has anything to do with faith. Because to believe firmly that they exist, there really isn't a logical basis. I know that there's probabilities, and that's usually how it's done, but the fact is we really, really don't know. So as somebody that has a great interest in science and grew up with that, I can tell you, I'm really, really funny about believing in something with no rational basis for it that is not in the proper area of faith. So believing in God, we can talk sometime about the logic behind that. And the church has said that it's possible to know that God exists by logic. That was stated in Vatican I. But that's an article of faith about logic. So, you know, for me, practically speaking, somebody pretty much has to have an experience of God, I think, has to have an experience of God to really know in a way that really matters a lot. It isn't enough to know that God exists or to prove it if there's no relationship. If he's not a loving God, then in a sense it's just everything falls apart. It matters who he is, not simply that he is. Does that make sense? I hope. So okay, that's the one thing. So we don't know for sure what exists, but let's say that tomorrow some aliens showed up. For them to get to us or to communicate to us, as opposed to us going someplace else, which just isn't going to happen. We're not going to be going out to the stars and finding people. I think probably ever, and that's a topic for another time. But I think there's things that are limiting about humans that unless we become a lot better people, I don't see how we're going to be able to get out to the stars. And the technical challenges are really, really big. But let's assume they come here. For them to get here, it would take a lot of ability. It would take a lot of intellect. It would take a lot of thinking and science and all that kind of stuff. So it means that they can think. And the second thing is that if they come here, I'm going to make the jump, and there's no logical basis for this. I'm going to make the jump that if they got here, that they chose to get here and weren't forced to come here by God. So if they have intellect and they have free will, then they're children of God just like us. And if he created everything, and I believe he did, then that applies to them too. An interesting question is, if there are people outside the earth on other planets someplace, or beings that can drift around that are still corporeal, that are made of matter and not pure energy or something like that. And even if they're pure energy, if they're made out of things of this universe, because energy is physical in a sense too, then they would still be creatures of God. You know, he would have made them. And the question then becomes, would they have fallen? When from their creation, was there ever a time when one of them chose badly? Did they ever use their freedom to do the wrong thing? If they did, then they're in need of salvation, and we would say that they're fallen like we are. Even if it happened in a different manner or anything else, it wouldn't make any difference. It's still that idea. Now, is it possible that God created someone, some whole race of beings that never do wrong? They simply always choose to do right, and they have the freedom to do wrong, but they choose not to, and that they've always made the right choices. Well, I don't know why that wouldn't be possible. And if that's the case, then they would be frankly beyond my understanding. It's hard for me to imagine somebody like that in, you know, a whole race of people. An individual person being really good, I can understand. Mary being without sin, I can understand. I can understand it sort of. I can certainly accept it. But the idea of an entire race of people living for thousands or millions of years and never doing anything wrong is hard for me to imagine because I'm just too flawed. I've seen too much of this world. So anyway, but the point is that maybe that's possible. I don't know. Maybe there's some other possibility I'm missing here. Maybe they fell and were redeemed a long time ago and got to a better place, and now they're just wonderful and everybody does what's right. There's all sorts of possibilities here. But another thing that I think is worth thinking about is when we say that God created everything, I think a lot of times people think that means that, I think they forget some things that he created. He had to create matter. Okay, he had to create the universe out of stuff, but he had to create the stuff to do it. That, and the idea of matter and energy themselves, those things, those concepts were part of the creativity of God, that he created those. He didn't just create stuff, he created the idea of stuff even existing. It's starting to rain, I don't know if you can hear it pretty heavily. So that's kind of interesting. But how about time? You know, when did he create all this? The thing is that we're talking about him having to actually, sorry, I'm distracted because I can't see. He had to create time itself in order to place the universe subject to time. So all these things, matter, energy, time, and maybe something I'm missing, all of those things had to be created by God. And if we picture that God, I've heard people say this, you know, oh yeah, God kind of waited around, and after, you know, a few trillion years or something, he said, hey, maybe I'll make some people. No, because that isn't the way it works. It's that he is eternal, and this is really a hard concept, but everything, God simply is, and he's not subject to time. If God were subject to time, then he would not be God. It would be like us, that without all the power. I mean, it's like we are subject to time, which means there are some things we can't do. It limits us. Time is a limiter. I only get so much time. But it's not just that. I can only move so fast. And my speed limitations are a function of time. I cannot accelerate my mass within anything but a certain span of time. It's a limit. I run sometimes, and when I run, I can feel that barrier. I can feel myself trying to push through and go faster. As a matter of fact, I really like that feeling. I like pushing that limit. I like being fast. But at the same time, you know, it's there. It's a limit. God doesn't have that limit. There is no time for him. Time, and it'd be easier to show this if I had my hands free and didn't have to drive. But God doesn't have that limit, and to him, time is something that he can look at. He can ignore, well, he can't, if he ignores it, it would disappear. But he can observe it and know it fully because he created it, but it never has power over him. It is rather something that he put as an integral part of the universe he created. So something to think about. Try to remember that it's about, that the creation includes a lot more than making people, and it includes the very idea of mass and energy and time and anything else that I'm missing. Quantum physics. He created all the stuff that they're trying to understand in quantum physics that nobody really understands. I mean, it's really funny. There's a really good quote, and I can't remember it right now, but essentially that we can only improve our misunderstanding of quantum physics or a lot of science. and that's okay. So anyway, hopefully that helps, and I'll post this up when I can, hopefully tonight. Anyhow, and write in comments or subscribe. I got to start saying that. Subscribe to my channel, and spread it around to other people if you think this is interesting. Post it someplace, any place you want. Hey, I got somebody actually took a part of one of these videos and put it on their own video and got a whole bunch of hits on saying thank you instead of sorry. So if you look for that on the Attention ATTN : channel. Anyway, it was out there, and a couple people actually saw me and let me know that they saw it, and they were kind of surprised. I was surprised. They did ask for permission. They did everything right. It was really good. Anyway, hope you're having a good time, and I'll make something else soon.